Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yuichiro Nishi. As Sally said, I am also a member of the Twin Cities chapter of Japanese Americans Citizens League, one of the co-sponsors of this event. I'll be moderating. I'm also a faculty here at the University of Minnesota. I teach, as Sally mentioned, along with my colleague John Matsunaga, taught a class on Japanese American incarceration and draw parallels with what is happening today. And I teach in Department of African American African Studies and also program in Asian American Studies. I'll be moderating again. This plenary session is called Impact of Islamophobia in Minnesota and Abroad, Stories of Resilience. And this theme of resilience will be something that we'll try to unpack and then also to frame that concept of resilience in a context of the conference, which is to develop strategies to challenge Islamophobia. We'll foreground, again, personal accounts as well as some scholarly accounts, analyses to facilitate dialogue. What I will do then is each presenter, we have 4 presenters, each presenter will have about up to 8 minutes or so to present. And thereafter, I'll do structure moderation, Q&A, as in the morning session, and then we'll open up to a larger sort of discussion with audience members. And again, the questions, you ought to present your questions on a card, index card, and again, the volunteers will come and pick them up, and then I'll sort them and then go through them and then be selective about how to present questions. Okay, so I want to go in order in which they appear in the program. So first speaker, Azuma Jama, and then followed by Mohammed Omar. I haven't met Mohammed, is right here. Okay, and then followed by Professor Todd Green. And then Jelani will come at the end. I believe that another speaker, Loris Saroya, again, will be absent from this plenary session. She was unable to join us at the conference today. So I want to start with Azuma Jama. Azuma Jama was born in Somalia but left as a young child and grew up in Kenya until she moved to the United States in 2000. In 2015, Azuma was the victim of a violent Islamophobic attack at an Applebee's in Coon Rapids here in Minnesota. She now works as a domestic and hate crime advocate and is in the process of starting her own nonprofit. She also wants to become a public speaker discussing issues of Islamophobia and divisiveness, which she believes lead to hate crimes. The next speaker, Todd Green, is Associate Professor of Religion at Luther College in Iowa. As a scholar of Islamophobia, Green recently served as an advisor at the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C., where he analyzed and assessed the impact of anti-Muslim prejudice in Europe and countering violent extremism initiatives, refugee and migrant policy, and human rights. He has also given lectures on Islamophobia to other federal agencies, including the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. The third speaker, Mohammed Omar, has been highly active in Minnesota Muslim community. Upon arriving in Minnesota in 2005, Mohammed worked as a manager at the Twin Cities bookstore. He served as a media director for Abu Bakr as-Sadiq Islamic Center from 2006 to 2008. Mohammed held several leadership positions in the Minnesota International Middle School in Minneapolis. In 2013, he became the educational coordinator and community liaison at Al-Jaziri Institute and currently serving as the executive director of Da Al-Farouk Islamic Center in Bloomington. And finally, Jelani Hussein is the executive director of CAIR Minnesota. In 2013, he created Zaila Consultants to develop and offer cross-cultural training workshops. Hussein has presented on the Somali culture to diverse audiences across the United States. He has been a recipient of numerous statewide awards, including being named one of the 2016 10 Outstanding Young Minnesotans by JCI. Hussein appears regularly on local, national, and international news outlets. His family emigrated from Somalia to Minnesota in 1993, and he's trilingual. Hussein holds degrees in community development and city planning from St. Cloud State University and political science from North Dakota State University. So again, thank you everybody. So we'll start with Azuma Jama. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello. A little bit enthusiasm. Come on, hello. And I'm going to as well say Assalamu alaikum, which means peace and blessings be upon all of you. My name is Asma Jama, and I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of what happened to me in Applebee's, Coon Rapids, October of 2015. So I don't like talking about it, and to me it sounds redundant, but if anybody does not know the story, I can just touch on it a little bit. So we went out for dinner, like in an impromptu dinner. Sometimes when I'm stressed out, I swallow my words. So we went for an impromptu dinner, and as we were being walked to our seats, this gentleman says, if you're in America, speak English. We were speaking Swahili then. The reason we were speaking Swahili, which is nobody's business, but is because the kids, my cousins had are Americans, then they only speak English. So we were trying not to give them dessert. Seriously. That was it. We were not plotting against anyone, I promise. So, and then then what happened was when they sat us, they gave us a seat whereby Jody, the lady that hit me, and I could touch our backs, but we were facing both different sides. So she continued from where her husband left off, obviously. She just kept saying, go home, I don't like people like you. And I'm like, okay, hold on 1 minute. What are you talking about? What people like me? And she goes, people like you? And I'm like, you mean Muslim? And she didn't say anything. So I'm like, okay, then Asma I don't know how to shut up. So I was like, why are you a racist? And then she just continued being belligerent, crazy. She was screaming. This time the kids were like, what's going on? So I had to talk to her like a grown-up, thinking that we're going to talk it out and that's it. So I turn around and I talk to her and I'm like, we have kids here and they understand verbatim everything you're saying. So please, if you don't mind, if you have a problem, I can answer your problem. Otherwise, this is done. So I turn around, mind my business. This lady just keeps going. So eventually the managers came. And the lady manager, instead of asking what's going on, just assumed that we were both on the wrong and said, oh, both of you were screaming, so we're going to send you out. And I'm looking at her like, huh? What episode of Twilight Zone is this again? So, and I'm like, are you talking to me? She goes, yeah. And I'm like, well, why don't you talk to her? She started it. I mean, there's all these people who can tell you I didn't start anything. Anyway, to cut the long story short, the manager was talking to me. Then I hear her husband tell her, Jody, let's go. Jody, let's go. So I turn around. I'm like, oh, my God, the lady that was screaming the whole night, finally she's going. Biggest mistake of my life. I turn around. She just hits me with the beer mug across my face. So basically, that's what happened. Went home, did not understand why it happened to me. I had the hardest time understanding how a human being can do that to another person. Not because I was fighting her, not because I went there with guns flying, I was just there for dinner. And she decided to attack me because she doesn't understand what's on my head or what religion I practice. Like, I don't get that, but anyways, to each his own, right? So I don't want to dwell on that. The thing I learned from it is not everybody is the same. We cannot, and I refuse to put white people in a box because a crazy lady decided to hit me. That's wrong. That's stereotyping. Exactly about Islam. Stereotyping brings Islamophobia. Islamophobia brings hate crime. It's all the same. Like, if we want to combat Islamophobia, we have to look at it like this. The reason why the Islamophobia, the word phobia means fear. So I'm not necessarily going to stand here and say every white person is bad or they don't know anything about Islam. Some of them really do not know a Muslim. They haven't seen a Muslim. All they see is what they see on Fox News. I don't blame them. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, who are they talking about? Those people are crazy. And then to realize, oh, they're talking about Muslims, you know? So it's like conversation should be had among us, American citizens, period. If you have a question, ask a Muslim. It's not that difficult. We don't bite. We don't eat, I promise. I'm not ISIS, I'm not affiliated with them. I will answer your question to the best of my ability, but if we do not have conversations, if we do not, as Minnesotans, I'm not even gonna go talk about the whole of the United States, that's just too much. Charity begins at home. Minnesota is my home. And I want Minnesotans to understand this. I didn't come here to take your job. I didn't come here to take your house. I didn't come here to take your existence. As a Muslim person or a Christian person, you have your own life and I have mine. And I can guarantee you this. You can look down on immigrants as much as you want. First of all, English is not our first language. We speak other different languages. So if my English is not perfect, then live with it. Hello? You know, live with it. I'm sorry. If my hijab bothers you, live with it. I'm not taking it out. If my existence bothers you, then please go see a psychiatrist because there's something wrong with you, right? So it's simple. It's let's have a conversation, decent conversation. We're all grown-ups. We talk about, if you have a question, ask a Muslim again. I'll keep repeating that because that's where you'll get your answer. If you watch Fox News, they will show you things that a Muslim like me or Jailani, we're not ISIS, we're not affiliated with them. Another thing that makes me so mad is like something will happen. Okay, yes, we do condemn every single time they do something. But I've never seen myself sit somewhere and ask my white friends, like, why are you not condemning the guy that just shot Sandy Hook? Because my friend had nothing to do with it. And that's the problem with us Americans nowadays. We put so much pressure on people who are going through Islamophobia, who are going through a very difficult time right now, and then you're telling us to take time out of our life, where sometimes life itself is crazy, and condemn. What has that got to do with me? Somebody crazy doing something crazy. Like just the white shooters that shoot movie theaters or schools. It's got nothing to do with you guys. So that's the problem, stereotyping. Again, it all falls under the same thing. We stop stereotyping people. We respect each other. It's so simple. We are human beings. We bleed the same. We feel pain the same. We mourn the same. We wake up the same. We put the pants one leg after another. It's not like you're white, you'll just wake up and you rest. I wish. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is we're all human beings. And without conversations, nothing's going to change. We all know what times we live in right now. These are I've been here 18 years, and to be entirely honest, I look at this country and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then the rest of the world are looking onto America, like always. And we are the joke of the whole world right now. That is sad. Really, really, it saddens me because I love this country. It gave me a second chance. I'm an American citizen. So as much as anybody here who has a problem wants to tell me to go home, I will gladly go home, but it's Minneapolis. It's not Somalia, it's Minneapolis. So it's just a matter of respecting each other. It's a matter of understanding what you guys cannot understand, challenging Islamophobia as a human being is something small that we can all do. If you see something, say something. Don't let, on our watch again, anything happen to anybody like what happened to me. It's not fair. It's not fair. I didn't do anything. I was just a Muslim at the wrong place at the wrong time. So me, I don't like the word victim. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. And from a survivor's point of view, if somebody at the Applebee's that day got up and said something, I believe maybe, I don't know, as a Muslim we believe in whatever that's written for us, we will have to go through it. But if somebody had said something, if somebody stopped something, then maybe it wouldn't have escalated the way it did. So this is my vision. My vision for Minnesotans, again, I said we'll talk about America as a whole. My vision for Minnesota is this. We sit, we talk to each other. Do not talk over each other. You have a question, ask a Muslim. We are everywhere. Don't be scared to approach me if you see me with my hijab. Honestly, I'm a gentle human being. I don't bite. I talk a lot, but I don't bite. So, I mean, I think my time is up, if I'm not wrong. Before, where is he? He was supposed to, I told you, mute. So again, thank you so much. I don't want to take much of your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Wow, what a speaker to follow. But someone whose story I did know, and it was great to hear her tell that firsthand, but mostly the turn you took on the message a lot of us need to hear. I sometimes get asked by Muslims, what can we as Muslims be doing more to combat Islamophobia? I'm always hesitant to answer that question, in part because for American Muslims, Islamophobia doesn't come from you. Comes from the majority population. And when you as Muslims are fighting Islamophobia, you're trying to survive. For too many people like me, fighting Islamophobia has become an extracurricular activity that we get around to when we find the time in our busy lives. But for Muslims, it's not an extracurricular activity. It is life and trying to survive and survival, and that's why I appreciate what I just heard. Last year, I'm a professor, so I don't follow a normal calendar year. I follow the academic year. So the academic year begins in September and then ends in May, and then I don't know what the summer is, but it belongs to some other dimension. But my last academic year, I was on sabbatical from Luther College, and I spent the year in Washington, D.C. The end of the Obama administration, and then at the beginning of the other administration, advising on Islamophobia, right? But I remember very vividly November the 9th, which is the day after the election, and I woke up in my apartment in Northern Virginia. First thing I did is I turned to my wife after I got confirmed the news on who won the election, and I turned to my wife and I said, well, number one, I'm about to have the most ridiculous job in all of Washington, D.C., right? Because an advisor on Islamophobia in the Donald J. Trump administration. You can't make that up, right? Secondly, though, I did a lot of soul searching because I've been at this, in terms of my research and activism, full-time for about a decade now. And I woke up on November 9th thinking, what the hell is happening? What are we not doing that we should be doing? Because by almost every metric, Islamophobia has been getting worse in the past decade. By almost every metric. Hate crimes, legislation, politicians instrumentalizing Islamophobia for political gain, you name it. And this is on both sides of the Atlantic. Islamophobia has been getting worse. And I had two conclusions, two theories. A, it's getting worse because not enough of us are combating it, which I think is true. And B, it's getting worse because we need to rethink our tactics. My sense is both of those needed to be addressed. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you feel like you've been doing good work for a decade and you look at what happened and you think, well, am I part of the problem, right? So a lot of what I've been doing since then, since I left Washington, thank God, is I go around the country and I speak a lot. Colleges, universities, masjids, churches, interfaith organizations, sometimes other government agencies, and a lot of the communities I speak in that aren't government related at least. Two common themes people want me to speak about the most. It's the Islamophobia industry, which I'm going to get back to. We were introduced to them this morning. And it's how to combat Islamophobia. You know, so here I am as a scholar, and I can tell you all about the history of Islamophobia and European colonialism and the origins of this, but what people are wanting oftentimes, if they're receptive to me, which is another story, is, you know, how do we respond to this? So I'm going to focus my brief remarks here on what I've been telling folks, at least in a nutshell. We can maybe have conversations afterwards if anyone's interested on me fleshing some of this out. But how do we challenge Islamophobia? And for most places I speak, I focus this in two ways, in the short-term responses and the long-term. Long-term is much harder. And long-term I don't think is what we've been focusing on nearly enough, because this is going to take years. If you want this to be done by next week, you're at the wrong conference, right? But the short term, at least, what we can be doing more of, and particularly those of us in the majority population, allies, those who seek to be allies, so we can speak out more. We have been silent, by and large, for a lot of the time that Islamophobia has been getting worse. And silence, as Dr. King has reminded us of, is complicity. Silence is saying that the status quo is okay. And this comes from politicians, this comes from churches, this comes from many other organizations and individuals who know something of what's been happening, but they have said nothing about it. And speaking out can happen in words, it can happen in actions and deeds. It can be grand gestures like going to the airport to protest the Muslim ban. It can be a small gesture like going out here where Gail Anderson has these blessed Ramadan signs. That small gesture can actually mean an awful lot, not only to your Muslim neighbors, but sends a signal to your other neighbors about with whom do you stand? For what do you stand, right? And if your neighbors don't know where you stand on the issue of Islamophobia, that is a problem. That is a huge problem, and that's one of the reasons we're where we're at today. So individually or collectively, that's what we need to be doing more of in the short run, in word and in deed. And what I often tell audiences I speak with is that you have to make your messaging in terms of speaking out against Islamophobia organic to who you are. And particularly if you're part of a community or an organization, right? What are your values? So when I speak on college campuses, I often look at their mission statement before I go speak. What do they proclaim that their values are? And then how can they shape their messaging against Islamophobia to reflect their values, as an extension of their values? The college I teach at, Luther College, is a college of the church connected to the Lutheran denomination. We created a statement at a grassroots level several years ago, right before the primaries, because Iowa is the center of the universe once every 4 years. And all of those people talking about Muslim ID cards and registration systems, they were going to come through our town. So we created a statement, but we made sure it was reflective of the Lutheran nature of the institution, right? So that's how I want communities to think about it. What's organic about you in terms of your theology, in terms of your values, your moral commitments, right? The long-term solution is relationships. Building relationships is key to combating almost every form of prejudice, including Islamophobia. And we have studies on this. We have data on this. If I know someone who's Muslim, and know in a very deep way as a friend, I'm much less likely to be prejudiced against Muslims. I'm much more likely to have, you know, a positive view of Islam. But this works with any religion. Just insert the religion that's different from yours, and it works the same. Mormonism, Catholicism, Protestantism, any kind of religion, right? And there's an entire theory that has developed around this in the social sciences called intergroup contact theory. It dates back to the 50s in the context of the civil rights movement, but knowing someone of a different racial background than you and having a friendship with them, a relationship with them, made you much less likely to be prejudiced. The thing is, we have also data suggesting that people in the majority population don't have a lot of relationships or any relationships with Muslims. Huge numbers, about 2/3 of Americans in the majority population say they don't know a Muslim personally. I know of a study off the top of my head in Germany which is very similar. And you see some differences within the demographics. Younger adults are much more likely to know a Muslim than older adults, right, who are in the majority population. So building those relationships are key. The final thing I want to say to end this is something that can be provocative. I don't mean for it to be provocative in a bad way, but in a good way. But as we think about relationship building and educating the public about Islamophobia, I would like to encourage communities to rethink a little bit about how we engage the public about Islam and whether Islam 101 talks, as I call them, in and of themselves are the best way to combat Islamophobia. I have great respect for Islam 101 talks or educating the public about Islam. I think how we conceptualize that education process is very important. If it's part of a program of relationship building, that's when you have success. If you're just dumping information about Islam onto a community, it can be problematic. As I tell folks, if you remember who Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller are, these are the people behind the Ground Zero Mosque controversy and all sorts of other nonsense. I like to tell folks, even Robert Spencer knows the 5 pillars of Islam. Even Robert Spencer can quote the Quran. He can quote it a lot. He can quote medieval scholars of Islam, exegetes of the Quran. He can quote hadith. And he's still a bigot. So what's wrong with that picture? The problem, I believe, is because Islamophobia is not fundamentally about ignorance of Islam. It's a form of racism. Okay? And that's key. It's not just about misunderstanding of Islam. It's about racism. And what racism has done to majority populations in Europe and the United States, it has warped our minds. It has damaged the cognitive frameworks by which we download information about Islam. And to that degree, when people now in the majority population encounter factual information about Islam, it's not downloaded properly because of the warped cognitive frameworks. We are no longer in the majority population epistemologically capable. If I can use a fancy word, right? Epistemologically capable of learning about Islam in a way that's healthy. We download it into a warped framework and it results in warped thinking. That warped framework cannot be repaired outside of relationship building. It's the relationships that repairs the framework. It's the framework then that enables us to engage Islam in a more healthy way. So Islam 101 talks, if that's part of what our community is about, do those talks. Introduce people about Islam and its teachings, but do so as part of relationship building, or you can just as easily have a Robert Spencer sitting in your audience, and they're just going to take that information and they're going to weaponize it and use it against Muslims. That's exactly what the Islamophobia industry does. Final thing I will say, we need to spend a lot more time organizing and responding to the Islamophobia network. As much as we do Islam 101 talks, I would love to see even more Islamophobia 101 talks and exposing, discrediting, and disrupting the Islamophobia industry, which will take networking, organizations, and I hate to say it, it'll take money. But when we start doing that, I think we'll also start seeing the needle move on Islamophobia. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. So, my name is Muhammad Omar, and listening to Asma Jama and the professor, Asma incident happened 2015. So I will fast forward 2017. So, first, I am executive director of Dar al-Farouk Center in Bloomington, a father of 6, and one of the faith leaders in Minnesota, faith in Minnesota, or in other words, Isaiah. So our story starts this, and as many and most communities have stories of discrimination, hate, and aggression. As Muslims, we have faced all three. So like most of faith leaders and imams, I shoulder the issues, hopes, and dreams of my community. So as you all know, in August 2017, my mosque, my community, my faith institution was targeted with a bomb thrown through the window of the imam, severely damaging the room, shattering the sense of the safety in my community. So let me tell you that day how I spent like few minutes before and few minutes after, because what that day I was going through it wasn't hours, it was seconds, because the pressure was immense. I spent that day before the horrific event. I was in a great mood, supervising renovations and moving furniture in a welcoming a charter school who wants to rent in our building. So we left all the doors of the building as I was working the whole day until the next day, 4 a.m. Our doors were open, and just to despite the construction dust. And you see, we had no sense, we have no reason to not feel safe, because we were enjoying our life. We were just having, you will live in Bloomington, 5 minutes away from Mall of America, and 5 minutes away from the airport, Minneapolis International Airport. So at 5 a.m., as I was working, I just went in my room, tried to rest a little bit before the morning prayer, which was around 5 a.m. Probably I slept 30 minutes before the prayer, and somebody, one of the community members, knocked the door and woke me up and said, there's a fire in the building. And I'm like thinking, what can generate or what can cause this fire? Because it's 5 a.m., there are some constructions going on, and I had no doubts. There is no oppression, there are no kids, there's nothing. The building is very quiet. So I woke up dazed, shocked, and half asleep, and I rushed out of the building looking what's going on. So I couldn't see because from within the inside, the smoke was going outside and the fire from the window. Inside of the hallway, there was no, because the doors in the building are fire doors. So the fire was kept inside the room. Immediately I called 911. The sprinkler went off, and fire alarm is sounding because I'm half asleep, everything is times 2. I don't know what's going on. So at that moment, I called 911, and I said, there's a fire. And I went to the fire panel. We have a fire panel. Then it showed the imam's room. The fire is coming from the imam's room. So the fire department came, and the firemen came, and they opened the door. They looked at the door inside the room, and they said, because they used to be before a fire alarm, false alarm, which most of the time when they come because of the kids, because of something happened, they'll tell us, this is okay. And so this time we get to know each other. This guy, deputy fire marshal, he said, Mohammed, this time things are different. I said, what? He said, there is something there's something happened, and things will get excited, so be ready. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't know, I cannot tell you more than this. There is something exploded in the building, in the room. And my heart dropped, because the last thing you will hear as a Muslim in Bloomington, because we've been dealing all these phone calls, you bring in Sharia law, you guys are trying to kill somebody. And as a Muslim generally in America, and as a Muslim in Bloomington, where we live at that moment, we have a very tough neighbors, some of them, not all of them, who gave us hard time. Something exploded in the imam's office. I wasn't ready for that. So at that moment, this is what I was thinking. I called the fire department, 911, which they should be helping me, but now they're telling me there's a problem. Who else should I call? So there is a problem. The 911 told me there's a problem. There's something exploded in the building. And looking back right now, when I see most of the people talking about Islamophobia, or how can you prevent Islamophobic attack, or all these things, it is, when it's in the paper, it looks good, but when it's happening in real life, there is nothing can make you prepare when the room next to you will be bombed. And what would you do? I mean, how can you prepare yourself? That was my time looking. All my friends and all the community members who came to me, they were all shocked. They don't know what happened. They don't know how to feel. So the only thing they did was, please don't talk to the media. Media will come. do not say anything, and please let us hide. And they all left from the building. So I left like I stayed in the building because I had the fire department and police have to ask me questions. And the first thing I thought about is called imams or called Jailani. And Jailani that time he wasn't in the country, so I said his phone is not, nobody's answering because CAIR is the second 911 that you can call when you are a Muslim and there is a problem. So and the police tells you there is a problem, and the fire department tells you there is something will get excited. So the CAIR is the second option that we have. So I call CAIR, and Jailani his phone is not answering. So most of the imams or faith leaders from our community I called, they said, we don't know what's going on, just wait until the police tells you what to do. So now I have to come back to police chief is there, everybody. So names that I have never heard, ATF and bomb squad, and like almost 120 people came to the building. So at that moment, I am the target. Every question they want to ask me, and I'm like, I'm the victim. Please help me, tell me what happened. No, tell us who was here. I said, last time I checked, we were all preparing for prayer, and I don't know what happened. Just tell me what happened. So that time, I called one of the imams, and he said, Muhammad, it's this very tough time. I'm advising you to own your narrative. Please stand up and say what happened. And I said, okay, my English is my fourth language, and things are getting tough. All my word bank are getting like over because I have been answering all this time to all these groups, and now I don't know what I'm saying. I didn't have a good sleep last night. So he said, no, I'll come to you, I'll stand next to you, and please just say whatever you want to say. Even if you want to speak Somali, I'll tell them what happened. So at that moment, looking at myself and the situation I was going through, I was like, there is no training would help me, or nobody could give me something that I can say, because I am first fearful as a Muslim living in this country, going through all this, for the last 15 years of, since 9/11, that Muslims, everything happened, you are the second guest. Like somebody will do something and all the mosques are targeted. And Fox News, they had a station in front of us for almost 5 years because 1 or 2 kids from the area went back home, left and joined ISIS or something like that. So at that time, I am in a position that I don't have the hope that I can come up with an answer to the media. So my friend came, and the good thing is he called all the faith leaders, Minnesota faith leaders. And that gave me a little hope. They came and they said, this mosque was attacked. While police and all the law enforcement agents are saying something exploded in the room. So there's 2 different stories. So something exploded. Who did it? Nobody knows. So these guys, all faith leaders, they came, the Jewish leaders and Christian leaders, and all of them came, different forms. And almost within 2 hours, all of them came and they said, an attack on one of us is attacking all of us. And that so when I listened to Asma's story, Islamophobia can come in a form of bottle, which is a mug, or in a form of bomb. So it's every time you don't know where this thing is coming from. And thank God that morning, for the 2 or 3 hours I was there, it looked like 3 days for me, because every second that was going by me was counted as a very threatening and fearful. So despite all these challenges, we held our ground and showed up and showed our resilience. We had multiple faith leaders who showed up, as I said, from almost every corner, and they said, whatever, this is like, we are with you, Muhammad, don't get scared. And some of the advice I remember from our law enforcement friends who were there, please don't say anything because we're not sure what happened. And I was like, I am sure what happened. Somebody attacked us. Because I know what happened to me. I don't know what you're feeling, because whatever you're talking about, I was in this mosque last night, I felt, I was working and something happened and it came from outside. So tell me who can do this. Because, and the stereotype is because we are a Muslim, if you would be a church, they would be immediately saying there's some, terrorist attack happened here and we still figuring it out, but it's a terrorist attack. But as a mosque, everybody was saying something exploded, or even finally, afterwards, the FBI took over the case and they said something exploded. Before, it was like something happened in this room. I mean, we can go back and see the media, how they were reporting. So, the thing that makes Islamophobes stronger always, it's not the few who are attacking. As I realize right now, what I realize is the silent majority. When all these neighbors you have, you cannot go any one of them, and you don't know them. I mean, that's the problem is knowing one-on-one and like getting to know them. We have been inviting them and giving them sambusa and baklava. I mean, somebody knows. But all those sambusa didn't come into our favor, because those sambusas gone, and now we are in the middle of this problem. And I don't know what to do. So immediately what I did was I just moved on and spoke to every media who came, and then I said, yes, somebody attacked us. And I remember that back then that the law enforcement were calling me and said, please don't escalate, just wait. I said, okay, you wait, I will say, and whatever you figure out the reality, just tell me. So, what always I say, those faith leaders, when they came to us, it gave back some sense of hope that we have people who can stand next to us and say, this is wrong. They are victims. Because sometimes the worst feeling you would have in the middle of this is as you get attacked, and then you still feeling you are the guilty person. You are the one who is suspected. And the questions from the law enforcement were, who was there from your employees that night? I said, what do you mean who was there? Everybody was there. This is a place of worship. Everybody comes. We pray. We come here. So don't ask me in a suspect question, in a way that I am the suspect or I am the person of interest. That's how they say. So they come back and they ask, how many contractors you guys had? Is there anyone who you guys didn't pay? I'm like, all white people, we paid them. Okay? Just to make sure that no white was angry. Because that's what I told the FBI guy. I said, all white people, we paid them. He said, what do you mean white people? I said, the question you asked me is you don't want to say we have a suspect, and then you just want to say them, you don't want to say this is white supremacy or this is Islamophobia, or all this is not in the discussion. What's in the discussion is the contractors. So I said there are two different contractors. There are white contractors, and there are people of color contractors. So we paid all the white people. So he said, okay, whatever, because this is not their field. They are not politicians, as they say, always. But they do the politics. So 3 days after the bombing, as the community was still struggling to deal with this, we organized a solidarity event. Over 1,000 community members, elected officials, and religious leaders from around Minnesota came in solidarity with our community at Dar al-Farouk Center. And that was literally, I mean, I wasn't expecting that. That was the crowd, the energy, people who are telling me I live next door. I mean, I wish I knew them when I was going through that morning, but I didn't know. But that time, I get to know them, and I felt like we are not alone in this, problem. And that was I always, we have to, as a Muslim, our faith is teaching us to be grateful. So I always tell, every media and everywhere I'm speaking, I am so, glad that we're living in Bloomington, because those people who came to us in our support reminded us that we have a good neighbors who, even though they were not proactive, but when bad things happen, they came to us. So seeing all these things, and this event gave us, as I said, some hope. On the other hand, Islamophobes didn't stop, even after the bomb. Still, they are commenting and they are writing, including the Washington, which is the head of Islamophobia, saying that we don't know, this may be inside job or hoax, or you know, this, we don't know what happened, and please, this is a left or Democrat. I don't know why left and right are very important to them. But my, you know, humble, like this, I'm a layman about this politics. I'm not, I'm an imam. What I know is preach people or, you know, work in the mosque. So people are fighting over us, and I don't know which one, to be honest. I mean, both sides, as I would say, well, some of them, some of the politics, they will tokenize us and they will take us as a granted as Muslims. Always we are, you know, voting Democrat, and we are voting Democrat, but at the end of the day, the Islamophobia was there and it's here, and unless we tackle, it will be there. You know, as a society, we have to, all of us, you know, stop this problem. So Islamophobia keep writing, including our neighbors. People, I know their names, are saying this is inside job, this is hoax, this is fake. I mean, it's not true. And that, in our community inside the mosque, the community, if I give you the picture, people are disappearing from the congregation. People are taking second thought when they come in and bringing their kids to the mosque, because they're saying, Muhammad, are you sure we're safe? Who did something to these people that they are following? I don't know who did this. I mean, that's what everybody asks you. Are we, you know, doing something wrong, or is there anybody who we are kind of fighting, or we are not fighting with anybody? The only problem we have, our skin is not white. That's the only thing I know, because if you are a white, I mean, there's a lot of support you have especially in the place we live. That's what I always tell my community. Please be strong. We will go, you know, over this problem. And as a community, we are going through a very tough time, and some of our neighbors who are Islamophobes are saying this is not true, and that is what they say, adding, you know, insult to the injury. So after a year, or almost a year, 3 individuals, as you guys all heard, from Illinois, traveled all the way from Illinois, came to our mosque, and what they said was, quote, simply we're trying to send a message that Muslims are not welcome here, and their envelope was a bomb. So they're like, their mail was a bomb. So, and as a leader, I'm always say, you know, this is the issue that we're facing, and the people who are behind this right now, we realize it's not in few individuals who got angry at us or who don't like, you know, Muslims. It's a huge industry. Like, people are paying millions of dollars just to kind of establish this industry of Islamophobe, and to make it in a way that, you know, it has roots. People, sometimes they'll come in a form of, you know, media. They'll have, because we have a guy who writes about us all the time, and I think he's the owner of Alpha News. He will say everything that he thinks or everything that he believes, and then he said, this is what Muslims say, and that's what he believes, and what he, you know, that his view of Islam. And then he will just say, this is what Muslims, and this is what Dar al-Faruq stands for, and they are bringing Sharia law, and they are having all this. So as a leader and as a community, we try to kind of reach out the politicians, and try to reach out our community, and try to reach out our neighbors, to show them, you know, we need, being silent is not helping. I mean, we need to speak out. And I know, finally got a group of churches came together, and they have an organization called Isaiah, and they trained us, and they took us how to organize the community. And I think now we are, and as CAIR, always, you know, helping, trying to kind of wake our community, because most of our community are internalizing this pressure, this oppression, this, you know, they victimize themselves, because there is nobody you can talk to, and nobody you feel you can tell, and they will do something, you know, for you. So our story is still going on, because the 3 guys are still in custody, and we are hoping that the justice will be served, and they will be get what they deserve. But my message to you is, we are human beings. I am a father of 6, and I don't want anybody to kind of feel what I am feeling. And that's very horrible when your kid and your child is asking you, who's attacking us? and you can tell because you want to be nice. You don't want to you don't want to teach hate, because in America I learned something called potluck, and I'll just give you this example. In Somalia, potluck, it's not something, we don't know. I mean, you go to a family, they invite you, they give you the food. There is no food you can come to the house of the other family. It's embarrassing. But in America, it is a potluck, and that potluck was great until I figured out there is something called hate potluck. Okay? Everybody bring whatever hate you have, and we can come together. Sometimes their message is not even going along. I mean, some of them are hating Jews. So I was asking one of the Republicans who came to us, who is trying to kind of tell me the problem, where this problem is coming from, is because Muslims are not explaining Sharia law. And I told them, okay, Muslims have that problem. What about Latinos? What do they do? Is there Latino, I mean, do they have a Sharia law? What about African Americans? Why are you just focusing this group, and you want to make me believe that your problem, your white supremacist problem, whatever you call it, is only Muslims? It's not. This is like people who, I mean, they need help. That's what I would say. They need help, somebody to teach them how not to hate, because their hate is taking over them. So when they, so I would conclude this, and this, I think there's a lot of this, because our story is like, I can talk the whole day, because my feeling, I feel every time I talk, I didn't say exactly what I feel, because that's how much we went through. And finally, what I would say, please, if you want to, help or, stand, against this Islamophobia, speak out. I mean, always it's good to learn and listen. But when it comes, especially, my message is to white people, because I don't know how to be politically correctness, because I'm not a politician. This is exactly what it's coming from, because the race, I mean, the discrimination is going against all minority people. It's they differ. They're like, there's different names, but they're all same. It's somebody who want to hate, somebody who have no other thing to give except hate. So, and they can, what they are expecting from us is us to respond hate, so they can justify what they're doing. So as a faith leader, we are not allowed, our faith is teaching us, whoever, like in the Quran it says, if somebody, faces or comes to you with a hate or with a oppression, the one thing, if it's a word, I mean, if it's violent, you have to run away and you cannot just stay there. But if it's words or in a systematic way, you don't just stand up and respond again to those people in a hate way. So you, as a Muslim, our community, I'm just telling you, we don't want to justify what these people are doing and respond back hate, because hate always doesn't bring any good. So thank you for listening, and this is my humble story, and I'm not a professor or Asma, who is a good speaker. So that's what I would say, and thank you for listening. And
how do I get to be the last? Man, first of all, I'm just really honored to have Dr. Todd Green and Esma and Muhammad. Speaking about Islamophobia is one thing. Seeing it every single day is another thing. At my office, I get the calls. We deal with the worries. As I travel across the state speaking to families and kids, and it's tough. It is really tough. I am really hopeful today. When we put this conference together, we were very hopeful about bringing so many smart people into the room, so many caring and passionate people into the room, and I think we accomplished that. And that gives me a lot of hope, because it has been very difficult. It has been very difficult. I'll start us out by saying this past week was also very difficult. Of all the cases that I hear and I get calls from at the office and our staff has to wrestle with, the one that punches me in the gut is bullying. You know, I remember I was in Grand Forks, North Dakota. I'm sorry, Fargo, North Dakota, and I was speaking at the mosque, and I just spoke to a couple of kids, and I found this kid standing in the corner, so I talked to him and for a little bit, and then I asked him, did you get bullied? And he stopped for a second and then started to talk, and he started to cry. And I remember telling him, I'm going to make that difference. And I called his teacher, and we talked to it, and I talked to him afterwards, and I told him, if there's anybody who ever does anything to you, know that I have your back. And this past week, it was really heartbreaking. There's a story that will be coming out soon of a suicide of a Muslim kid in Minnesota, we believe because of bullying. So I'm really appreciative for all of you for being here. And as difficult as this conversation is, it is also really a challenge. You know, I always say this to myself more than anybody else, but I always say that I don't want to be those people that look back in history and my children and my grandchildren ask me, what were you doing during that time? You know, were you in those black and white pictures of protesters and people or were you sitting at home? So I'm going to keep my conversation really brief. We're 15 minutes behind, so I know some of you are looking at the schedule. Some of you are schedulers. And my staff will let you know Jelani operates in another time zone. I just show up whenever it's convenient. No, I'm not that bad. I just tell people I was giving you so much extra time, so I don't show up. I don't surprise you by being early. But I'm going to keep my presentation really small and just to mention to you a couple of things, and I'll allow for Q&A. And for some of you who might have been in the other presentation, this is a little bit of... So Islamophobia is happening everywhere. Obviously, North Dakota and in this area, it's been very prominent. And there's three things that are really key here. Obviously, the hate groups, and I'll talk about that because most of us don't recognize who the real hate groups are. There are the speakers that are sensationalizing, that put us in the dichotomy that you talked about, which is, you know, I just need to know more about this because that's what I'm being asked, right? I learned a phrase that I think makes a lot of sense. What's not reasoned in cannot be reasoned out, right? And the other thing about speaking up, we've heard that from all of you today. I personally believe that the progressive left, to a certain extent, have a paralysis. We see on the trolls and we see the negative messages. When the mosque was bombed, I mean, it was like Fox 9, whenever their article, it was like shameful. And not a single positive comment. In fact, today, there are 50 negative op-eds in Minnesota compared to 1 positive op-ed against Muslims. That's the rate we're at. The good people outnumber probably 1,000 to 0.001. But we failed to say something. And that's what we really want this conference to be about. We need to change how we interact. And we need to insert ourselves in the conversations, not be around the conversations. So hater anti-Muslim speakers are traveling right now, and they're speaking to people. How many of you have heard of this guy, Ron Branstad? Right, some of you may have not. From St. Cloud, right, car salesman. He doesn't bash Islam, but he really talks about the coming of the Muslims. Right? And we believe since 2013, he's probably given about 30 presentations and maybe spoke to about 4,500 people. Right? This next guy just bashes Islam. That's all he does. In fact, every place where he has been to, we believe something has happened afterwards. In fact, in Bemidji, where he spoke in a number of occasions, what would happen is all of a sudden the international students in Bemidji would get harassed daily while they go out and shopping. And that tells you that Islamophobia is a racialized issue. In fact, most people did not know when a city council, when a county commissioner or a county board was looking at an application for a Muslim cemetery and the room was full with 80% Muslims. They still rejected the application thinking that everybody in the room was against the mosque because 80% of the room were Bosnian Muslims who were European. In fact, when this guy speaks, we believe he has spoken since 2013 about 67 times in this region, North Dakota, South Dakota included, and Wisconsin. and we believe spoke to at least 10,000 people. That's the guy that people tell me about when I travel to Greater Minnesota. In fact, he never goes anywhere uninvited. Every single place he goes, there's a group of people, sometimes between 5 people, 7 people, or 1 woman. I say that because I know there's 1 woman in Bemidji, actually in Bagley, Minnesota, who will invite and make an entire case upon it. 2 weeks ago, I actually was in the Southern Poverty Law Center office. We met with their staff. I was there, part of a delegation that CAIR National and our staff went in celebration of, taking part of a celebration of the opening of the Legacy Museum, a museum I encourage all of you to attend in Alabama that really reflects on the history of lynching in this country. Powerful, that I'm still circling through and still figuring out how I process all of that. But I've talked to Southern Poverty Law Center, and this is not accurate. I just want to let you, this is not an accurate number. This is the first layer of hate groups. In fact, as we have these discussions, the Minnesota number is probably going to go to about 25 anti-Muslim groups. Because the current hate groups are unincorporated. They use minimal online presence, so you're not going to find them online. And in fact, they use deceptive names. The group that targeted the Bloomington Mosque is called the Friends of Smith Park. And it's a handful of people, led by 1 woman, again, in Bloomington, who kept blogging, who would go to the mosque and actually look inside the mosque and count how many people in there. And on Ramadan, come and put a camera and record activities. And then blog about it and write about it to the point where the National Network of Anti-Muslim Network picked up on it and read articles and articles. In fact, there's not a mosque opposition in Minnesota where she is not the reference of. Where people will say, if you allow the mosque, look what happened in Bloomington. And she's the one who painted the target on the mosque. That those 3 men passed nearly 150 mosques or more on their way to bomb the Bloomington Mosque. That's how hate groups work. But they're hiding behind the Minnesota Nice naming. Wilmer First, which by the way is not even people from Wilmer. It's folks from St. Cloud who are coming to Wilmer to try to create problems in Wilmer. Right? Or Friends of Hudson, or in St. Cloud, the Coalition for a Peaceful St. Cloud, or other names that they're using. So hate groups are trying to be under the radar. And that is why we need to do even more. And trust me, all of them are working really hard to do that. Some of you don't know the militia groups, including the militia, the Red Rabbits, or whatever the rabbits were called, the ones that actually attacked the Bloomington Mosque. This is an example of one of them. And I'm just going to show you this video, which this is from 2016. And these men are actually practicing on a makeshift mosque. Okay, so they make this little mosque, right? And then they put explosives inside it. And if you see, these are rifles with bump stocks, right? So this is high-powered rifles. You see the mosque there? And there's actually explosives inside this mosque. So when they actually shoot at it, you see the explosion, right? We have a 3% militia group in Minnesota. There's a 3% militia group everywhere. These groups have existed for a long time. But now they have zeroed in and focused on Muslims. In fact, in Minnesota, the conversation is about immigrant and refugees. It's another code word so people don't get offended by the fact that I just don't like Muslims, or the fact, as Dr. Green mentioned, racism, right? So this billboard went up attacking Catholic charities. And there was a blog, literally it was a blog, right? Back in the days when blogs looked like that. And this blog actually still looks like that. But in fact, this blog has now become mainstream. This fringe information is now being pushed by think tanks. The irony of this story is that there was a storm that canceled their event. That was totally irony. But you see now the conversation about refugees becoming something that is mainstream. And in Minnesota, it's an easy way to do that. In fact, Jeff Johnson, who's running for governor of Minnesota, wrote this op-ed, Refugee Resettlement Pause. Isn't that look like the Muslim ban state level? That's exactly what's happening. In fact, if you talk to the state demographer today, she'll tell you that there are -2% of white people living in Minnesota. In fact, we have a crisis looming ahead. We have an aging population in Minnesota, and if we do not grow, this will definitely impact the opportunities that we have and the quality of life that those who have worked so hard to build have in the state. In fact, when most of us don't understand that the policy of DED that affected our Liberian brothers and sisters, who represent nearly 10% of healthcare workers protecting and serving citizens of this country and senior citizens in home healthcare in many places. Imagine all the Liberians leaving Minnesota. We would have a health crisis. The question is, even to the point, and I will say this, many people believe that the Democrats are nice and the Republicans are just tough. I say both parties are to be blamed. In fact, the Democrats a lot of times are so spineless that they use political rhetoric and say, well, this is not the right time. And when they don't have power like now, they want to push our legislation. And I told them, I don't want you to help us now. I'm going to get a Republican because I need a Republican to push it through. Right? I know there are some Republicans, we need to push them into the But the point I'm trying to say here is that politicians understand that in difficult times that they want to live through it. But we need politicians who will stand and history will keep them forward. Right? And so this is important because right now in the state of Minnesota, not Alabama, in the 1960s, we have 2 legislators who refuse to meet their Muslim state constituents. Can you believe that? 2 Republican legislators, Cindy Pugh and the other one, Kathy Lomer, refused to meet Muslims at their office. In fact, I have to say I had to apologize to her staffer because I asked her, I said, is there anybody else where they ask these questions to delay the opportunity to meet? And in fact, they don't. So my conclusion, and I have to conclude because I'm getting excited. My conclusion is we have to take the gloves off. If you read The Second Coming of the KKK of the 1930s, that book, you realize that is exactly what the anti-Muslim movement is today. It is the hoodless KKK that has wrapped itself up in the charades of hate. In fact, the 1930s KKK didn't pride themselves in hanging people. They pride themselves in owning people. They pride themselves in owning an entire state called Oregon. They ran police departments. They had picnics. They had events. They had anti-Catholic and anti-Jewish speakers traveling and rising people against people. They used poor people against poor people. And today, that's exactly what's happening. In St. Cloud, in many of the places I talk to, the people who are confused and are afraid are people who share the exact same pain as their Muslim neighbor who's working in the factories. And so what I'm asking you today, and as I end this conclusion, is that Minnesota cannot be the failed state on Islamophobia. Minnesota can actually take a leadership in challenging and calling out bigotry as a racist return of the KKK, and we will not stand for it. That is how we build a spine, and that is how we turn things around. And in fact, most people today enjoy being called Islamophobes, but I know for sure they hate being called what they truly are, which is a resemblance of a history that is so painful that many of us know we will never return back to. So with that, I will end, and I know we'll take maybe a few questions, and we're running a little bit behind, so we have 15 extra minutes. As I mentioned, we have hate crimes. All of those things are happening. Our Muslim women are obviously the #1 target. They're a walking flag. And as I mentioned, also the student bullying is extremely high. If any educators are in the room, we're trying to do something this fall. We're looking for people to engage us on some of these subjects so that we can do a little bit more. I want to just finally say, we're trying to come up with ways of how to respond. We need people to play different roles. We have about 580 volunteers, so if any of you are interested in doing something, there's a lot of people we can work with. There's a lot of people that we can turn around. In fact, one of the things that is so powerful is the stories. We have to tell the stories, right? This area, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, is home to Muslims from a long time ago. From a long time ago. In fact, we don't want any Syrians, but it was Syrians that were living in Minnesota and North Dakota for a long time. We've had only allowed 11 Syrians in the country this year. 11. While Syrians have millions of people today that have nowhere to go, who are sleeping outside in camps. Minnesotans come from all places. In Minnesota, we should be proud. We were the first state to introduce the first American Muslim congressman to the country, Keith Ellison. We have CEO of Fortune 500, Umar Irshad from Medtronic. We have men and women who serve the United States Army. We have many Muslims who are doing such amazing, wonderful things. And these are the stories that we need to hear on our local TV and our local stations. And these are stories that we need to amplify, and the many more. And so with that, I will end, and I'll allow for Dr. Yuchi to do that. But before I do that, if everything fails, if it all fails.
Do you think your neighbor is a terrorist?
Hey, how you doing? Hey! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
Does your fear of Muslims get in the way of living a normal life?
No! He's coming!
Did you call an Uber?
Fine.
Yeah, we'll take the next one, it's fine.
All right. Okay. You saw the app.
I didn't know. I didn't know. It said Mo. I didn't know.
Do you judge people by their outer appearance? Introducing Islamophobia, now in an easy and convenient chewing gum. Starts working within 5 minutes to relieve bigotry and intolerance. Call your doctor if your Islamophobia worsens or you have hallucinations that discrimination isn't real. Side effects include fondness, brotherhood, acceptance, loss of bigotry, increase in rationality, and possible denouncement of superiority.
I didn't realize I had a problem, but admitting is the first step.
Islamophobia worked for me. Ask your doctor if it's right for you.
So I want to make my part shorter and be sure to elicit questions from the audience. But I do want to return to, again, the question or the concept of resilience. And maybe I wanted to start just with the definition of resilience. And I think this word is used quite a bit now, not just in a political context, in the difficult times like now, but in other realms in science too, in the age of climate change. And resilience is used a lot, how to create conditions for resilience to withstand, survive, persevere in difficult times. Essentially, the definition of resilience is capacity building for perseverance, survival. The operation, I think, of resilience is quite complex in difficult times and challenging times again. And I'm not a plant biologist or anything like that, but I know that to reverse the trend, climate change does require enormous efforts, not just the sort of individual efforts on our part, but to reinvent the system, which is to begin to think about how to abolish the system in which we live, and then to bring about sort of a whole new society. So the question of transition is an important one too. So in that vein, sort of drawing the sort of comparison between the age of climate change and age of Islamophobia, and then thinking about, again, resilience, I think that the conditions for resilience, I think, move from strength to strength, not merely by speaking up, and not merely by breaking the silence, which this conference, and then of course the speakers today on this panel did just that, does that. The testimonies are powerful way they're bearing witness to the truth. But at the same time, Professor Green, and also this morning, I forgot the name of Professor Bazian, Professor, it really struck me. I really liked the definition of Islamophobia when he said it has nothing to do with Muslim. And I think that's a really important sort of a shift. Has nothing to do with Muslim, but everything to do with politics and power. Everything to do with how that's organized, how that's exercised, to take away humanity, to take away from the very idea of personhood from individuals. And Asma said something like this, that when that confrontation happened, when that woman confronted her, nobody stepped up to defend her personhood but herself. Likewise with the case in Bloomington. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that that shift, the definition of Islamophobia is very important. It has nothing to do with being Muslim or Muslim at all. It has everything to do with politics and power. And it has, in many ways, it parallels how we understand about race too. And we've worked so hard to, and we're still working so hard to communicate that race has nothing to do with skin color. Again, but everything to do with politics and power. And I think that the presenters are sort of beginning to do that. But again, in times like these, really kind of, a lot of despair sets in and certainly hopelessness. I just think that the breaking the silence alone doesn't cut it. So with that in mind, I wanted to sort of pose a question, again, thinking about resilience, which is capacity building to withstand, to persevere difficult times. How would that concept of resilience in the context of resisting and challenging Islamophobia be, the concept can be, how should I say, what's the word, be deepened by way of introducing other key words such as, well, I think this sort of came up in talks, but solidarity. So thinking about resilience and solidarity, how might that look like? But on top of that, thinking about resilience and solidarity, but I think the elements of unpredictability and creativity are incredibly important. Given that, again, Islamophobia is like an industry. I really like that. It's an apparatus. And then again, Jelani just mapped it out for us in a systematic way. But how do we think about resilience and solidarity and mix into that the notions or elements of unpredictability and creativity or unpredictable creativity? How can we play around with these keywords to, again, think about resilience in times like these? I know it's a little bit kind of conceptual, but.
You're the professor.
I can, let's say, I can give my personal story. So as a member of Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League, so we went straight up to the nerve center of Islamophobia, which is St. Cloud, with Jelani, CAIR, Minnesota. And what was striking about that presentation was that the irony just went way above people's heads, people who are adamantly sort of, defending this industry called Islamophobia, way above. They did not make any connections, didn't. And in fact, what sort of baffled us, and then Jelani sort of reminded us, is that these racists turned to us, Japanese Americans, but specifically Sally, who was incarcerated, the survivor of incarceration. And then into her face, these racists said, "I am so sorry for what the government did to you." Wow. And meanwhile, they turned to Jelani and "You're a terrorist." So what struck me about that is that it's not this, what struck me about this is a good and bad minority. Sort of bifurcation is happening. So morality play is at play, right? Why can't you be like them? What's wrong with you? You're a terrorist or whatever. But as an Asian American, sort of, trying to do some work, making connection between the past and present, what sort of reminded us of Asian American, we're sort of always strained with the stereotypes of being model minority and so forth. We're a good minority who has assimilated into the mainstream. And at that moment, I mean, and then reflecting on it afterwards too, I mean, this is when Asian Americans need to kind of step up and say, speak up, speak out, to say we're not your model minority. And that, to me, for instance, it sort of it presents a case of resilience in solidarity. Is that solidarity kind of appears in these unpredictable way when you do solidarity work, and it pushes the dialogues in a different way and mutually reinforcing way. So the both groups are engaged in struggles together, but also respectively as well as, you know, together in solidarity. But anyway, so that's what I was thinking about when I sort of grappled with ideas of unpredictability and creativity in thinking about resilience. But anyway, so that's.
I have nothing nearly as good as that. But I do like this notion of thinking about this in terms of creative ways to respond, because maybe what's been going on for the past couple of decades is we haven't been creative enough, or thinking outside the box enough, or as I said in my talk, that we've narrowly conceived of Islamophobia as just a misunderstanding, or the word that gets overused these days, misinformation about Islam, as opposed to something that's manufactured, something that's rooted in racism. That's not about a misunderstanding. It's got an ulterior motive to it, right? The one story that comes to mind to me, it actually happened last year, almost a year ago at this time, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where a student organization on the campus called Young Americans for Freedom. And by the way, anytime an organization has freedom in its name, it's you're starting to, as Jelani was talking, you're starting to lean towards they're probably up to no good, right? But Young Americans for Freedom, this little small student organization, invited Robert Spencer, the head of Jihad Watch, to come on campus to speak, and it created a big controversy on campus about freedom of speech, and in many ways, all that was following a pretty common script. And in the end, the president decided, well, no, you know, because of freedom of speech and academic freedom, that sort of thing, we really feel like we have to let him come, even though the college doesn't want him here as such, but for freedom of speech sake, he'll come. So, you know, this is exactly what Spencer wants, and he's going to get his drama. And what the religion department did is they turned around and they invited me. Now, I'm not a creative response necessarily to Spencer, but they were actually much more savvy about it. They invited me to come a few days before, and they asked me to give a talk not on Islam 101 or some other minutia that I might do in my scholarship. They asked me to give a talk on Islamophobia industry and Robert Spencer particularly. 3 days before he came. So he and I were on campus at the same time, and I hope to God I'm never in the same room with that man. That's not on my bucket list. So I go there, I do my sort of Islamophobia industry spiel, right? Who are these people? Where do they get their money from? What are their tactics, right? Their strategies that they use, including the way they get onto college campuses. And I talked specifically about Jihad Watch, which is part of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, where this money is coming from. And I didn't know how this, I mean, it went fine with my audience. I didn't know what kind of effect it would have on Spencer. This is what I'm getting to, which is 3 days later, he comes on the campus. He's got his typical spiel, Islamic radicalism and fundamentalism is the biggest danger the United States has ever faced and will ever face in the future. But I made myself watch, because it was recorded on YouTube and put on YouTube, I made myself watch his talk, which was its own form of punishment. But what was interesting about hearing Spencer 3 days later is that he was having to respond to me. And he was having to respond to what I told the audience about the money. And it was clear that bothered him. He didn't like to be accused of doing this for financial gain, right? Which is exactly what he's doing, and political influence and that sort of thing. But I felt that he was off message. I've listened to this guy enough to sense that when he's on message and when he's not. I felt that he was on the defensive. I'm not used to seeing him on the defensive. We're on the defensive all the time. And for once, it was nice to have this turnaround and a moment of resiliency for this community, I think, and the Muslims in this community, to see a man come on campus who thinks he's owning the narrative, which he usually is, to be honest, and that industry is, and then being on the receiving end and having to defend himself. And it was also a moment for me of thinking, we need to be doing a lot more of that. And it wasn't planned that way in some kind of orchestrated sense, right? But it was the idea of taking back the narrative and not being on the defensive, being on the offensive. And I think it can work. It didn't cost a lot of money to do it, you know, but I think it can work. And to see Spencer in that position is helpful as we think through ways to not be just always responding to Islamophobia and to the industry around it, but to be in the driver's seat, which we need to do a lot more of.
Mm-hmm.
You agree?
Okay. I mean, practically speaking, I mean, if I look back what happened to us in our center, when I see the situation, how this Islamophobia machine works, is they are very clear of who they're hating and what they're saying. And on the other hand, people who are standing in solidarity with you, or people who like came to in your support, they are like people who want to listen from you. Like it's us who were attacked versus people who attacked us, and everybody else is watching us. Like kind of, okay, what do you want to say? How do you want to respond to them? I mean, so we are not in battlefield. We are not in a war against each other in this group. We were attacked, and we need people who see what happened to say, you know, this is wrong, and to stand up. And afterwards, I mean, before I think our attack, before the incident happened in our mosque, we had a lot of complaints from one or two of our neighbors that Jailani mentioned. One of the women, two of them, but one is very loud. So whenever she says something, nobody responds. Everybody listens to her, and she has an archive. She prepared almost 5 years of data, how many people came into our center, and you know what were they doing, and how our center is not, you know, a good place for the kids and everything. But when you see, on the other hand, when after we got attacked, people came in our support, and now I've seen people who are speaking on behalf of us in the city council. You know, when there's a complaint from us, people will come and tell us, please let me speak on behalf of you. And that's where I feel like now they become minority, because there were 2, now we got 10. Just like this, we have almost, the neighborhood we live is like almost, you could tell like tens of thousands of people live there. So now 2 people used to attack us, and now 10 people is in our support. So now we are like 8, we like majority is supporting us and minority is attacking us. So they become irrelevant, and their, you know, argument become, even though we went through a big thing, I mean, they shouldn't be waiting until a bomb hit us and then they come in our support. That's what I would say. Before it happens, if people are speaking, you know, up and saying the small complaints, or these speakers who are coming and visiting us, who, like there was a guy who supposed to be coming in Bloomington, and I don't know, CAIR, I mean, took them out of the hotel. I don't know what happened, what they did, but he was trying to teach more Islamophobia, and he is in support of everything that against Islam. So if people are not, when they hear that, if they are not going to the hotel and saying, please stop this is not right, this thing will spread, because they are organized. Even if they have 2 or 3, they will be investing more time and putting more time until they get more people. So the more people, our supporters or our allies are not speaking up, are not saying this is wrong, the more these people are spreading their message, and that's what I would say.
Okay. I want to maybe then turn to some of the questions. This one, there's another one that's kind of similar. It has to do with the form of resistance, resistance to Islamophobia, and it takes different forms. And some of you probably, I mean, it's everywhere here in the neighborhood, but you know, you're my neighbors, kind of showing sort of ethos of beloved community. You know, you saw those lawn signs and everywhere, right? So this person who is asking a question is sort of calling into question that form of sort of, quote, solidarity, but relationship building and between Muslims and non-Muslims that you see in the form of, let's say, signs that are on the lawn or in the storefront. The question is, if so, what do you think of these this particular type or gesture of solidarity? Is it commodified or tokenized? So wanted to hear a comment about that particular form of solidarity.
So I can start. You know, I want to just recognize Natalie from Unite Cloud, who's here, and I'm going to use you. I'm going to use you as an example, Natalie.
We have signs.
Hey. Oh, I'm not concerned about the science, but I'm concerned about you. And the reason why is because when people who are not Muslim make this their priority, it has a huge impact. And Natalie is put in a very difficult position.
Yes.
And she could tell you that her family and her friends constantly come under attack, verbal and all kinds of things. And I'm going to say, challenging Islamophobia is not easy. What we saw in the heroes in Portland, it's not easy. And I want to be able to say that. But at the same time, if we don't have someone like Natalie and others in St. Cloud, we're not making a turnaround. You know, and so we need real people to take this course. You know, when the reverends and the pastors and the activists went down to South in Montgomery in Alabama, it was a race thing, but it was white people who said, I am going to put my life at risk to make a change for the better of me and my children and the future of our nation. And I believe that's what we need to do. And I think we can be better for that.
I think I'll just say the same thing he said. Like, hi, Natalie. United, I mean, you're amazing. Again, it just goes back to we have to do, everybody has to do their part. I'll keep repeating that and sound redundant, I don't care, but everybody has to do their part. We have to have conversations, we have to change the narrative. Islamophobia, I don't think it was built, it just started when Trump became president. This is something that probably was going on, and it came to surface when Donald Trump started opening his mouth, but we all know that this is a problem and it's not gonna go away overnight. It's not gonna go away tomorrow, not next year. We have a lot of work to do. So the best thing to do is everybody go look in the mirror today, talk to yourself. Really, honestly, just talk to yourself alone with nobody in the room and ask yourself, do you wanna be on the right side of history or the wrong side of history? Because this is it. This, whatever we do today, from today onwards, is going to shift this country to a place where it has never been. And I'm pretty sure, thank you, Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, everybody, the whites that I do not know because I don't know the history very well, that fought for the freedom of black people to fought for the women's right to vote, are going to turn in their graves because we are going to do amazing things. But again, it starts with all of us. Go today to the mirror, talk to yourself, just one question, wrong side of history, right side of history. That's it.
So,
right.
I just want to share a small, story. I'm not a good storyteller, but as what happened to us, everything has to, it's becoming stories. So after we went through what we went through, we have approached a group called Isaiah, who said, okay, let's train you guys first, because there is a lot you're going through, and this oppression that you internalize, take it to a public life. And I didn't quite understand what it means, take it to a public life, because everything was coming from public wasn't good to us. So I didn't want to, touch the public problem. So I went through that meeting, and on the other hand, what we get to know, what we used to see from these kind of trainings, it's more of talking what people should do and shouldn't do, the right thing, that people would never go through deep into the problems and bring it exactly how it is and discuss the issues. So that training I learned, one of the things I learned was, I knew it, but it hit me hard when one of the instructors said, Mohammed, this happened to you, yes. What did you do about it? Are you ready to stand up and do something about it? I'm like, yes, but she said, no, you are not ready. You're still hiding in your fear. And that was a 1 week long training. After I get out from that training, the first thing we did was, me and my friend Abdullah, who was there, we said, okay, let us organize ourselves and reach out the neighbors, and we started having, they said, you guys have built your power around you. That was the training. So we start training our community members and saying, let's go out and caucus and get our people into the voting system. soon we started. We have a lead organizer from Isaiah training us, and she was training almost 8 mosques and trying to turn people out into this caucus night. There was a video that night, like one of the training came out, and that video was just a caucus training. How do you do it, and how you walk in caucus, it works and all this. What happened was, immediately after that video came out, like went into the social media, tens of thousands of comments, hate comments, even sometimes, life-threatening comments, because they call it, this white woman is training Muslims to infiltrate the system. On the other hand, the problem that these people was saying before was Sharia law is against the system. So now people who believe Sharia law try to be part of the system, and now they're saying they are infiltrated. So I'm complimenting, that Laura, who stood up and didn't get scared when everybody was saying. She went viral into media. You guys know social media, people behind their desk and they don't want to come out. They just want to say everything that they think they can, get away with it. And people like Laura and the leaders of Isaiah stood up and they said, no, we are not hiding. We are taking it to the next level. They challenged it. That's what Jelani was talking about. We went the Muslim Day of Capital. There are 2 Republican, leaders who he mentioned them. I'm not good with names, that they shared and they kind of hinting that this is what they're doing. Please stop, because usually what they were afraid that we will go to Republican caucus and then we take over, and that's what they said. Because one of our imams said, who can decide in American politics is whoever shows up. Because if you show up that night, the caucus, walking cause, that's yours. This is your right. And they knew, and they are so angry about it, and they don't know what to do with it. So now they go after whoever was doing the right thing. And people like, Laura and, our allies, when they are standing next to us, they make sense. It feels like, you have power. It feels your voice is heard. And that's what I would say.
We have to wrap up. So just wanted to close by saying that this really reminded me that ethos of solidarity is here. But of course, we also need to cultivate some ethics of commitment to do the right thing and to push back some of these ties. So thank you again. Okay.